Okay, so it's now the early hours of the morning, but still fresh enough to talk about the subject at hand, and that is the 90th birthday of Queen Elizabeth II. This is obviously a very important milestone for a few reasons. Firstly, it's the first time any British monarch has reached this age, and as I understand it, it's the first time a female monarch anywhere in the world has reached this age. Though there have been a few male monarchs who have been slightly older, I believe. Pepi II of Egypt was in his late 90s when he died. But it is a historic milestone. Queen Elizabeth II is the world's second longest reigning monarch after King Bhumipol of Thailand, um, and Britain's longest reigning monarch at 64 years. She surpassed Queen Victoria last year, who reigned for 63 years. After that comes King George III, 59 years, King James VI of Scotland, who reigned for 57 years, and I should explain that a little bit because he was King of England for about, I think, 22 years, from 1603 to 1625, but he had been King of Scotland since 1568, 1567, I believe. So, as a British monarch, i.e., of anywhere in the United Kingdom or the British Isles, he ranks at number four. Number five, I believe, was King Henry III, 56 years, although Henry III today is a largely forgotten figure. And then fourth place, I believe, was King Edward III at 50 years. And then after that, you get people like Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and it sort of goes along those lines. The average sort of time seems to be about 25, 28 years. That would be the sort of average time for monarchy in the UK. Few things to talk about today. There's obviously been a lot of coverage of this. This is the headline of the Times today. I like the way the Times has done this in recent years for big stories. They sort of have a special cover on top of the cover. So within the paper itself, they have the regular headlines. News there on the death of the comedian Victoria Wood, who sadly passed away yesterday. They also have an interesting feature at the back, which is news from 1926, the year the Queen was born. The BBC had an article today showing photographs of the Queen every single year of her life from 1926 to the present. And there's coverage in that. I've just been watching the film The Queen with Helen Mirren. I could do a film review, but to be honest, it's going to take up too much time. Except that's been a very documented film and heavily discussed film. Maybe I'll do that at another time, maybe not. I think it's already a well known film, so I don't think I really need to add to it very much. I want to just show you briefly a few books that I've got on Queen Elizabeth II. This is by Andrew Marr, and another one here by Robert Hardman. They were both published in the year of the Diamond Jubilee 4 years ago, and I haven't started either of them yet, so I'm going to get into that at some point. I just want to talk a bit about the future of the British monarchy as I see it. I read an interesting article in the Times the other day that this monarch's approach very much is precisely what constitutional monarchy should be, and her approach to it is what keeps the monarchy alive. Now, it's widely reported that the style of both Prince Charles and Prince William is very different from that of their mother and grandmother. Um, Prince William actually had a somewhat awkward interview, which I thought he handled very well, by Nicholas Witchell, the royal correspondent. He's just come back from India and Bhutan, and Nicholas Witchell basically point blank said some tabloids are calling you work shy. Now, that's something that even in the job centre, the advisors there wouldn't say to you directly. So I thought that was very pointed and sharp. And in my opinion, it's unfair. Um, I honestly think Prince William can't win either way. Because the fact of the matter is, if he did take a lot more engagements and was a lot more public, he would almost certainly be criticised for sort of trying to impose on his grandmother. And if he keeps up the pace he is now, which is already quite busy, he's doing his work with the RAF, he goes on royal tours, then he's criticised for not doing enough. So it's a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Prince Charles has a very energetic schedule. My own instinct, I have to say, is that I feel Prince Charles would be a strong king. Of course, there's no way to tell until it actually happens, but I think he would be a strong king. I feel that he would take a different approach to his mother, and I think, just based on interviews and based on things that I've read about King George VI, there would be some similarities between Prince Charles and King George VI. There is speculation that he would reign as King George VII as opposed to King Charles III, simply because of the sort of negative history that is connected with the Stuart dynasty. The current dynasty, for my international viewers, directly relates the Hanoverian succession in 1714 when King George I ascended the throne. Ever since then, the respective branches have come out of that Hanoverian dynasty. The Hanoverian dynasty lasted right up until Queen Victoria. Her son, King Edward VIII, was under the House of Saxe-Coburg. Then, during World War One, King George V changed the name to the House of Windsor because of the situation of war at the time. People were being killed in German Zeppelin raids, and there was a very strong fear that if the royal family was seen to be too Germanic, it would be a big backlash. So ever since 1917, it's been the House of Windsor. But we don't really talk in terms of we are the Windsor dynasty or this is the Windsor era. During the Diamond Jubilee, there was some talk about a second Elizabethan age, but generally speaking, people just see it as the modern era or, the era that we're in. Very few people talk in terms of being part of a Windsor dynasty, although that's what we are in. Um, I think it goes without saying that we're never ever going to see not just a queen, but a monarch like Elizabeth II again. It would be very, very hard to imagine another monarch reigning for 64 plus years. Um, it is conceivable to see a monarch living to the age of 90 because people generally are living longer. And obviously, if you're born into privilege, that's going to up your chances of having a long life. Um, I mean, her husband's 95, so longevity does run in the family. The Queen Mother, who was Queen Consort to King George VI, lived to the age of 101. Although, having said that, her father died in his 50s, although he was a heavy smoker. Um, I think that without being too morbid about it, let's say for the sake of argument, the accession, or the succession, I should say, happens within the next 5 years. So let's say, because this queen is not going to abdicate, there have been other European heads of state who have abdicated. That's not something that Queen Elizabeth II is going to do, and she's made that very clear. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that um, Charles ascends the throne in 5 years, just for the sake of argument. He will be about 71, 72 then. Now, let's say he lives as long as his mother and he reigns for 20 years. That will then bring Prince William up to the age of about 50. Let's say William reigns for 30 or 40 years. That will then bring Prince George, as he now is, up to the age of about 50 or 60. So gradually, the male line of succession is going to get older and older. And it's just going to end up like, because of the simple mathematics of it, it's going to end up like the situation that Prince Charles is now in. In other words, we're never going to see a situation where, again, where a young monarch takes over, unless there's a major accident. So, in my opinion, Prince William and Prince George are going to be middle aged when they ascend the throne. And of course, at that point, there's going to be serious questions about the British monarchy. I did see an amusing video earlier, and it basically showed all the kings and queens of England specifically. And then after Queen Elizabeth II, it started getting a bit ridiculous, and it started showing all these cyborgs and all ascending the throne. But clearly, it was tongue in cheek, and it was meant. I don't know whether it was a Republican video or not, but it was quite creative and amusing. To me, that's a very good thing, by the way. I've said this time and time again, we don't have absolute monarchy. And one of the things about constitutional monarchy is that the royal family is not above scrutiny. So, although Nicholas Witchell's question was pretty rude, I suppose on one hand you could say that it's healthy that we have a situation where journalists can ask those questions. I mean, if this was Thailand or Saudi Arabia, Nicholas Witchell would be facing imprisonment for that question. And it is a good thing that we don't have that situation. Also, cartoonists constantly take the mickey out of the royal family. You know, you have satirists and so on. And yet, this is a healthy balance because the royal family is also respected. There is a healthy respect there. So, in my opinion, we have the balance roughly correct. Um, I have to admit, I am somewhat concerned about what will happen when Queen Elizabeth II passes away. I mean, for one thing, I haven't known any other monarch in my lifetime, but it's also a question of how strong will Charles be as a king. I like the man personally, but personality isn't the only issue here. It's also about how strong someone can be. Strength of character is very important. I think Charles has got mettle. I think he's showing tough skin over the years. I mean, you know, he was very vilified during the whole Diana thing, and I think that was somewhat unfair because the public was only really hearing one side of the story, like Princess Diana could do no wrong and so on, and the fact that she died in tragic circumstances kind of elevated her to sainthood, and that was a bit unfair on Charles because Diana wasn't perfect. They both had affairs actually, and you know this is not meant to slander Princess Diana, but all I'm saying is that the side effect of that was that Charles was very much, you know, castigated. And this matters because this man will be our future king and head of state. Charles has on occasion been criticised for being too political. The question is he going to be like his mother? Clearly, he's not. He has a different style and a different personality. Um, I think there is going to be serious constitutional questions. It's quite obvious the SNP is going to continue pushing for a second Scottish referendum. Although, you know, I don't think it should happen because it would be breaking a pledge that that was a once in a lifetime situation. But I do think they're going to keep pushing for it because it is in their very DNA. It's what they live for. And that's going to pose serious constitutional questions. And then if that happens, there's going to be questions about a united Ireland and so on and so on. Um, it might well be that David Cameron is the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, depending on how long he stays in for, or more likely his successor, whether that be George Osborne or Theresa May, whoever it is. They're going to have a really tumultuous time in office because almost certainly the next Prime Minister will oversee the accession. The last time this happened was Churchill. Um, Incidentally, since 1952, the Queen has seen within the United Kingdom, I believe it's 12 prime ministers across her entire realm, 150 prime ministers. That's including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the Commonwealth realm. A few words on Queen Elizabeth II personally. I can totally understand why some people would view her as cold and at times even a bit, well, yeah, cold. But I do honestly think there is another side to her, and I think in this regard it's comparable to Queen Victoria. It is true the Queen can seem a bit out of touch and cold. For example, when a child gives her a bouquet, the thing is, someone like Prince William would probably like pat the child on the head or something like that. The Queen is very formal in those sort of situations, and I think that would lead to the impression that she's a bit cold and too formalised. And I have to admit, there are times when I feel that the formalities can damage the image of monarchy. I mean, on her state visit to the Republic of Ireland, which was a very important event, she visited the Guinness Centre, the Guinness factory, and someone there poured a pint for her. Now, any other world leader would take the pint and, you know, would, except for other royals, certainly David Cameron would just take the pint. And, you know, that would be, for the Queen, it was like, oh no, she can't do that. So I think that sort of formalities can sometimes be archaic and can, in my view, damage the royal family. So I don't agree with those who say that if Charles is more hands on, it would damage the image. I think quite the reverse. I think it would show that he is a man of the people, that he's down to earth. However, it is true that they need to get the balance right. Because if they are too informal, then it sort of goes against the point of constitutional monarchy and about being a head of state in that way. Um, I mean, presidents can do that, but I think for monarchy it's different. Um, at the moment, I consider myself a moderate royalist. I just cannot see this country being a republic. I just can't see it. And I know that's not enough of a reason to be, you know, a royalist, but that's just my instinct. The truth is, if we became a republic tomorrow, I'd miss monarchy. I honestly believe I would. I mean, I'm fascinated by history, and we have had 1,000 years in England. That's just in England, not including all the kings and queens in Scotland and the various Welsh kingdoms, of almost unbroken monarchy, with the one exception of the interregnum of 1649 to 1660. And the thing is, British people look back at that and think Cromwell the dictator, and they associate that with puritanical extremes. Now, of course, a republic today would not resemble that. So I think it's slightly unfair to weigh it up against Cromwellian legacy. But there's a lot of interesting issues at play here. So today is a historic milestone, and the future will be interesting. Some say that Prince Charles should just step aside and let William automatically ascend the throne. I can't see that happening. And I don't think William would be comfortable with that happening. Because what sort of role would Charles take on? It would always be kind of like his father is a shadow over him. So I just can't see that happening. But interesting, it's an interesting situation.